Good afternoon. My report is about nervous and sensory mechanism. The nervous system is the major controlling, regulatory, and communicating system in the body. It is the center of all mental activity, including thought, learning, and memory. Together with the endocrine system, the nervous system is responsible for regulating and maintaining homeostasis. Through its receptors, the nervous system keep us in touch with our environment, both external and internal. The nervous and sensory system divided into three: the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and the special senses. The central nervous system controls most function of the body and mind. The peripheral nervous system consists of the nerves and ganglia outside the brain and spinal cord. The main function of the peripheral nervous system is to connect the central nervous system to the limbs and organs, essentially serving a relay between the brain and spinal cord and the rest of the body. In medicine and anatomy, the special senses are the senses that have specialized organ devoted to them: vision, hearing, and balance. It includes the auditory system and vestibular system, smell, taste, and touch. The central nervous system components are the brain and the spinal cord. The brain controls our thoughts, memory and speech, movement of the arms and legs, and the function of many organs within our body. The spinal cord carries out two main functions. It connects a large part of the peripheral nervous system in the brain. Information reaching the spinal cord through sensory neurons are transmitted up into the brain. Parts of the brain. The brain has three main parts: the cerebellum, and brainstem. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and is composed of right and the left hemisphere. The left side of the brain is responsible for controlling the right side of the body. It also performs tasks that have to do with logic, such as science and mathematics. On the other hand, the right hemisphere coordinates the left side of the body and perform tasks that have to do with creativity and the arts. The cerebellum is located under the cerebrum. The brainstem acts as a relay center connecting the cerebrum and cerebellum to the spinal cord. Areas of brain. Broca's area is a region in the frontal lobe of the dominant hemisphere, usually the left of the brain, with functions linked to speech production. Wernicke's area is the region of the brain that is important for language development. It is located in the temporal lobe on the left side of the brain and is responsible for the comprehension of speech. The lateral sulcus, also called Sylvian fissure or lateral fissure, is one of the most prominent features of the human brain. The lateral sulcus is a deep fissure in each hemisphere that separate the frontal and parietal lobes from the temporal lobe. The insular cortex lies deep within the lateral sulcus. The central sulcus is a prominent landmark of the brain, separating the parietal lobe from the frontal lobe and the primary motor cortex from the primary somatosensory cortex. Meninges. Brain is covered by three protective layers: the pia mater, arachnoid mater, and dura mater. The meninges refer to the membranous coverings of the brain and spinal cord. There are three layers of meninges known as the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. These coverings have two major functions: provides a supportive framework for the cerebral and cranial vasculature. The skull, or the human skull, is the bony structure that forms the head in the human skeleton. Cerebrospinal fluid or CSF. Brain is bathed in CSF. CSF is contained in the spinal cord and in the ventricles. CSF is a clear, colorless body fluid found in the brain and spinal cord. It is produced by specialized ependymal cells in the choroid plexus of two ventricles of the brain and absorbed in the arachnoid granulations. The ventricles are filled with CSF, which butts and cushions the brain and spinal cord within their bony confines. CSF flows from the lateral ventricles via the interventricular foramina into the third ventricle, and then the fourth ventricles via the cerebral aqueducts in the brainstem. The nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is one of the four major classes of tissues. It is specialized tissue found in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Neuron. A neuron is a nerve cell that is the basic building block of the nervous system. Neurons are similar to the other cells in the human body in a number of ways, but there is one key difference between neurons and other cells. Neurons are specialized to transmit information throughout the body. A neuron has four basic parts: the dendrites, the cell body also called the soma, the axon, and the axon terminal. Dendrites receive incoming information from axon terminals. The axons transmit information to axon terminals. Information is transmitted along neurons electrically through action potentials. Action potentials take place when neurons have an influx of sodium ions and become positive on the inside. This triggers an action potential which is transmitted along the nerve. Action potentials are very quick due to saltatory conduction. Extracellular fluid. The extracellular fluid compartments in brain are the brain interstitial fluid and the cerebrospinal fluid, the latter occupying the four cerebral ventricles and the subarachnoid space. The CSF, like salivary gland fluid, is often regarded as an extrafiltrate of plasma. Saltatory conduction, enabled by myelin sheaths and nodes of Ranvier. Saltatory conduction is the propagation of action potentials along myelinated axons from one node of Ranvier to the next node, increasing the conduction velocity of action potentials. What causes saltatory conduction? Electrical signals travel faster in axons that are insulated with myelin. Action potentials traveling down the axon jump node to node. Saltatory conduction is a faster way to travel an axon than traveling in an axon without myelin. Axon terminal is the point at which a neuron passes information to the neurons with which it is connected. Electrical stimulus is transmitted chemically to the next cell by a chemical called neurotransmitter. The junction between the axon and the next cell is called the synapse. Synapse, also called neuronal junction, the site of transmission of electrical nerve impulses between two more nerve cells, neurons, or between a neuron and a gland or muscle cell or effector. A synaptic connection between a neuron and a nerve and a muscle cell is called a neuromuscular junction. Regions of the brain. The brain 5 regions: frontal lobe, primary cortex, primary sensory cortex, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe, cerebellum, brainstem, Regions of the brain function. The frontal lobe, decision making, problem solving, purposeful behavior, consciousness, and emotions. Primary motor cortex regulates voluntary movements. Primary sensory cortex processes sensory information received from the body. Parietal lobe receives and processes sensory information from the body, letters and words from thoughts. Temporal lobe regulates memory, emotions, hearing, language, and learning. Occipital lobe processes information related to vision. Cerebellum, initiation and timing of movements, maintains posture and regulates force, steadiness, and range of movements. Brainstem, connects brain and spinal cord and controls heart rate, breathing, eating, and sleeping. The brainstem also gives rise to cranial nerves. Cranial nerves, each of 12 pairs of nerves which arise directly from the brain, not from the spinal cord, and pass through separate apertures in the skull. Cranial nerves 1 or the olfactory, 2 optic, 3 oculomotor, 4 trochlear, 5 trigeminal, 6 abducens, 7 facial, 8 vestibulocochlear, 9 glossopharyngeal, 10 vagus, 11 accessory, and 12 hypoglossal. Mnemonic: on old Olympic towering tops, a Finn and German viewed some hops. What do the cranial nerves do? Mostly the control functions on the head and neck. Eye movement, swallowing, smell, sound, etc. Except vagus, major role in functions of head and neck, and provides parasympathetic fibers to nearly all thoracic and abdominal viscera. Peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system is the division of the nervous system containing all the nerves that lie outside of the central nervous system. The primary role of the peripheral nervous system is to connect the central nervous system to the organs, limbs, and skin. Peripheral nervous systems divided into two, the somatosensory and autonomic. However, autonomic divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Parasympathetic stimulates flow of saliva, slows heartbeat, controls bronchi, stimulates peristalsis and secretion, stimulates release of bile, and contracts bladder. The sympathetic dilates pupil, inhibits flow of saliva, accelerates heartbeat, dilates bronchi, inhibits peristalsis and secretion, conversion of glycogen to glucose, secretion of adrenaline and noradrenaline, inhibits bladder contraction. What are the special senses? A sensory system is part of the nervous system responsible for processing information. A sensory system consists of sensory receptor, neutral pathways, and parts of the brain involved in sensory perception. The 5 basic sensory systems are the sight or visual, smell or olfactory system, hearing or auditory system, touch or tactile system, taste or gustatory system. Sight. The organ of sight is the eye. The parts of the eye are the iris or cornea, pupil, aqueous humor, lens, macula, retina, sclera, optic disc, optic nerve, choroid, or retinal pigment epithelium. Light is captured by the eye and transmitted to the brain for processing into images. Optic nerve. The optic nerve is located in the back of the eye. It is also called the second cranial nerve or cranial nerve 2. The job of the optic nerve is to transfer visual information from the retina to the vision centers of the brain via electrical impulses. The retina contains photoreceptor cells. A photoreceptor cells is a specialized type of neuroepithelial cell found in the retina that is capable of visual phototransduction. Pigment epithelium photoreceptor actor segments and the photoreceptor synaptic terminals. There are two types of photoreceptor cell, the rods and cones. Rods are responsible for vision at low levels or scotopic vision. Cones are active at higher light levels or photopic vision, are capable of color vision, and are responsible for high spatial acuity. The organ of sight is the eye. Light is captured by the eye and transmitted to the brain for processing into images. The retina contains photoreceptor cells. There are two types of photoreceptor cell, the rods or cones. Photoreceptor cells contain visual pigments, blue, green, red, and monochrome. Smell. The organ for sensing smell is the nose. The nasal cavity is the inside of your nose. It is lined with a mucous membrane that helps keep your nose moist by making mucus, so you won't get nosebleed from a dry nose. Olfactory nerve. The olfactory nerve is the first cranial nerve and conveys special sensory information related to smell. It is the shortest of the cranial nerve and passes from its receptors in the nasal mucosa to the forebrain. It enters the skull to the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. Hearing. The organ of hearing is the ear. Sound is transmitted from the outer ear through the middle ear to the inner ear and to the brain via the auditory nerve. Touch. The organ of touch is the skin. A cross-section of the skin shows the major parts. It is divided into three layers. The outer layer is the epidermis, the dermis is in the middle, and fat forms the innermost layer. The skin contains several receptors for cold, touch, pain, and pressure. Sense organs in the skin. Three types of stimuli can activate pain receptors in the peripheral tissue or mechanical, pressure, pinch, heat, and chemical. Mechanical and heat stimuli can usually brief, whereas chemical stimuli are usually long-lasting. Nothing is known about how these stimuli activate receptors. The organ of touch is the skin. The skin contains several receptors for cold, touch, pain, and pressure. Gate control theory of pain. The gate control theory of pain asserts that non-painful input closes the nerve gates to painful input, which prevents pain sensation from traveling to the central nervous system. Message from brain which either opens like stress, low mood, or closes like distraction, enjoyment, endorphins, the gate. Messages from other parts of the brain such as pain, muscle tension, etc. Taste. The organ of taste is the tongue. An intact sense of smell contributes significantly to the sense of taste. Taste is enabled by taste buds. Taste buds are sensory organs that are found on your tongue and allow you to experience tastes that are sweet, salty, sour, and bitter. Taste buds like this one here hang out at three types of papillae: circumvallate, fungiform, and foliate. The organ of taste is the tongue. Different regions of the tongue sense different taste. The five specific tastes received by taste receptors are saltiness, sweetness, bitterness, sourness, and savouriness, often known by its Japanese term umami, which translates to deliciousness. References are that once Watson et al. .ac.uk for things about a simple approach to anatomy and physiology, the nervous and sensory system, and the special senses. Thank you.